So, before I jump into the Miss America protest of 1968, I wanted to give some background on the second wave feminism movement that took place from the 1960s to the 1980s. The second wave was sparked by a woman named Betty Friedan who wrote The Feminine Mystique. In this novel, she shared her personal experiences and her dissatisfaction with being a housewife. This reached many women who felt similarly, selling almost 3 million copies in 3 years. Esther Peterson was a fellow activist alongside Betty Friedan within the White House in 1961. There, she collaborated with Eleanor Roosevelt and Dorothy Height to send the Equal Pay Act to Congress. Then, in 1965, was the Griswold versus Connecticut Supreme Court ruling. Here, it prevented anyone from limiting a woman's access to contraception or other methods of birth control. This would later be used in the Roe v. Wade famous case. These legal victories gave women autonomy in public and private life, but many women of color were still disenfranchised. And let's not forget that the civil rights movement was in full swing while the second wave was still in action. Even after the 19th Amendment was ratified, African American men and women were still restricted by the Jim Crow laws, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses. And although African American feminists did not gain traction until after the Miss America protest of 1968, I thought it would still be relevant to include a woman who sparked that conversation. Her name was Frances M. Beale. She published Double Jeopardy to be Black and Female. Here she detailed the experiences of African American women during the feminist movement. She noted the exploitation of Black women in society and the different struggles between white and non-white feminists. In pop culture during the second wave, artists such as Leslie Gore with her You Don't Own Me climbed the charts. I'm Woman by Helen Reddy, Respect by Aretha Franklin, and Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 were monumental songs during this time period. Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best also dominated television. It was no longer surprising to see women leaders in formerly men's fields, like television production with Oprah Winfrey, diplomacy with Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, or Supreme Court with Justices Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. After talking about some of the most key events that happened in the second wave, I thought I would also talk about some of the common goals as well. And these are the equal pay for equal work, an end to domestic violence, curtailment of severe limits on women in managerial jobs, an end to sexual harassment, and most importantly, a sharing of responsibility within the household, and that is including the responsibility for children that live in that house. The origin of the Miss America pageant began in the early 1920s. Women all over the country sent pictures of themselves to be judged on, quote, personalities and social graces, which basically meant a white woman's beauty. The talent component was not added until 1938, so women could then be judged on something other than their appearance. Yet, at the same time, restricted the pageant to single, never-married women between ages 18 and 28. The icing on the cake was that Rule 7 wasn't abolished until 1940. This rule stated contestants must be of good health and of the white race. As you can tell, this pageant has been founded on misogyny, and Carol Hannish was the first to finally put an end to it. She stated, "Protest the image of Miss America, an image that oppresses women in every area in which it purports to represent us." The Freedom Trashcan was a prominent feature in the protest, although later it led to the myth and misrepresentation of women's liberation. Media portrayed these protesters as angry, unshaven feminists setting fire to their bras, later calling them bra-burning feminists. This turned out to not be true at all because there was no burning of anything, and the trash can was solely used as a symbolistic artifact in the protest. The Freedom Trashcan is where women could throw away all the physical manifestations of women's oppression, such as bras, girdles, curlers, false eyelashes, wigs, and other misrepresentations in issues of Cosmopolitan, Ladies' Home Journal, Family Circle, etc. These women also boycotted companies whose products were used in or sponsored the pageant, and male reporters would not be allowed to interview protesters. After the demonstration, the protesters and leaders did some reflection on the event and wished the protest was less anti-women. Carol Hannish stated that one of the biggest mistakes was the anti-womanism. Miss America and all of the beautiful women involved came off as our enemy instead of our sisters who suffer with us. Judith Forth was one of the winners of the 1968 Miss America. She stated, "I had people tell me it was a cattle show and that I was being exploited, but the goal of the Miss America pageant is to promote women and give them opportunities and scholarships that they might not get otherwise." She shows the part where women are using this pageant to their advantage, yet falling victim to the misogyny of the event. In opposition to the Miss America pageant, entrepreneur J. Morris Anderson created Miss Black America, so his daughter's dreams could flourish and not be belittled by American racism. Sandra Williams was the winner in 1968, and she stated, "With my title, I can show black women that they too are beautiful." Later, Oprah Winfrey in 1971 was also a participant in the pageant. While the 1968 protests may not have done much to change the Miss America pageant itself, they did introduce feminism to the mainstream consciousness and expand the national conversation about the liberation of women. Many historians now credit the 1968 protest as the beginning of feminism's second wave. After further research, a student named Grace Moore went on to prove that the entire bra burning ceremony was a myth. This is important because this derogatory term is still used today to describe the most radical of feminists. The burning of the bras was purely a term used to describe a symbolic moment of tossing things that oppress women into a trash can. But today, people use this term in a derogatory manner to make feminists out to be crazy women who aren't afraid to speak their minds. History has been shown to be cyclical. Women may not be fighting to get jobs and leave the kitchen, but they are still fighting for equal pay and basic human decency. After President Trump's inauguration, women and allies marched the Capitol to reaffirm women's rights in representing many of the same ideals as the protesters in the Miss America protest in 1968. Not long after, women began to share their sexual harassment and violence stories in the Me Too movement, where men would finally seek the consequences they deserved. This progression from the start of the second wave till now is still stronger than ever.